I'm here to talk about space travel, future of space transportation. Future of space transportation is something which we need to look up. What are the existing technologies? How we can progress the space transportation and technologies for the next 10, 20 years, 50 years down the line. We all know that NASA, Elon Musk, SpaceX, and European Space Agency and multiple other space agencies are working towards space exploration and different technologies for propulsions, or payload system, reusable, you know, capsule mechanism for rocket launching systems. So, but if you compare the existing current different markets and like mobile phones and space research, space technologies, there is not much innovation in terms of progress in terms of space transportation. So yeah, there are people like Elon Musk doing research on and new initiatives for innovative space, low cost space transportation, like exploration for Mars, and and much more than that, like interplanetary species for humans to make it humans habitable for Mars, making Mars more habitable with creating a habitable place for humans to live there. So, talking about the future of space transportation, right now there are existing propulsion-based, classical methods used for space transportation. One of the things that we need to look for in future for making a breakthrough for space transportation is laser ablation propulsions, which is one of the types of electric propulsions, and also using different kinds of ways for sea sail, like Voyager 1, Voyager 2, how we can increase the efficiency for better slingshots, and also for in terms of speaking of much futuristic way, that it is also possible that we might one day create a, a complete a rocket which is capable of going at the speed of light, which touching almost the speed of light. I know that if any object goes at the speed of light, it is possible that it can disintegrate. But using the principle, using the technologies like antimatter propulsion. Antimatter is nothing but the opposite of matter, which basically works with the opposite. So it is, if there is a hydrogen, anti-hydrogen is antimatter. So when matter and antimatter comes into contact, annihilation, huge energy is created, annihilation is produced, and huge energy is created, causing destruction. And with that, if we can store antimatter at a stable condition, and if you could use this substance for channeling into the right space transportation, I think it can be a great exploration for great initiative for space transportation. But we have scientists, or anyone in the current industry, space industry, haven't figured out how they're going to store antimatter, because creating a very small amount of antimatter from places like Large Hadron Collider from CERN or Fermi Labs, it's like antimatter labs are there, industries are there, but it's very difficult to create a very small amount of antimatter for storing the antimatter and using it for, because once the antimatter is generated, very milliseconds, nanoseconds, it just disintegrates, because when it comes in contact with matter, it just it just disintegrates. I think there's a lot of energy is required, there's a lot of power, and there's a lot of resources required for antimatter generation. But if you could create some kind of a technology which could potentially store the antimatter at a stable condition, and create a foolproof design which you could use it for rocket transportation, space transportation. And the amount of energy it's going to create is huge, that um, theoretically you can use it for for very large expeditions, space expeditions, like outside solar system, or sending different types of Voyager 3, 4, 5, 6 for different kind of space explorations. One of the projects I have been involved with during my college thesis, and I'm currently working with regards to space transportation, is I have worked on space research propulsions. It's called a specific technology. Like, I have researched what are the existing technologies which could potentially be used for you know for low cost space transportation, which is more efficient than existing ones. That is something is called laser ablation propulsion. I have so my project was a thesis to to propel the capsule which has nuclear waste in it to send it to outer space to get rid of the nuclear waste inside Earth. So the idea might be bad or good, because it could be very dangerous to to send nuclear waste which has high level nuclear radiation, which could potentially be destroyed on the way to its final destination. But if we can use that kind of technologies like space research, which is laser ablation propulsion for transporting payloads for different purposes like satellites and different Voyager 1, Voyager 2 for different kind of expeditions like satellites. And I think you could use this different transportation technologies for essentially to for sustainable solutions for people on Earth. For example, you have seen the California fires recently. It could have been prevented earlier, much earlier, if you have found a better way to use the satellite to to find or predict the catching fires at the California forests at the better earlier way, so that the team could have been there to stop it at the early time. So the point is that space transportation, space enabled technologies could be used for essentially for the betterment of humans and environment, for sustainable development solutions, be it epidemic forecasting, or be it some kind of a disaster response, or be it some kind of a hurricane, whatever it is, for forecasting, remote sensing. You could use better technologies, and it is important that we leverage, merge these kind of technologies together and use it for betterment of all the places which are not covered existing technologies that there are right now. And one more thing is like, we have been talking about a lot of technologies. We have like we have traffic, we have pollution everywhere. The next thing is going to be flying cars, and Uber is coming with flying cars. So they're trying to speak with NASA, they're trying to understand how to get the regulations ready. I think some people say it's impossible to get flying cars considering the regulations, and it's going to be I think if you are able to penetrate into the flying cars, it's going to be inevitable to have flying cars. Flying cars is going to be a very futuristic approach in terms of how people travel from one place to another place, and how we use these flying cars for for essentially to transport goods, or for using for a better forecasting of disasters, or use it for other purposes. I think it's going to be a different thing, how we're going to use flying cars, like Uber coming in and SpaceX doing different projects. But it is also important for us to understand that there is a lot of innovations required in terms of space transportation. Space transportation is right now very stagnant with respect to how we see the current trends are going. It's very slow, but if we can work on different kinds of essentially the how we can use the payload system, how we can use different technologies for moving the space transportation into better channels, essentially for sustainable solutions. For example, if we can get the mining done and moon, get the resources back, and trying to find a way how we could use humans, how we can transport humans to moon, whether it's possible to make them survivable, because there's a lot of water that is there in the poles, that we can use it to figure out a way that we could make it habitable, moon, Mars, and so on. And that is there for the for the next 10 years. It's going to be amazing how we could use these technologies to make the nearby planets and moons to make it habitable, like moons like Europa and Titan, for example. That might be quite habitable, considering the imaging and everything we have got. It is habitable to to send initially for the first 2 to 3. You could send the satellites and examine the the conditions. And it's important that we take one step at a time and push the our status quo to the next level, bringing these technologies. Talking about antimatter, I think the challenge is that antimatter is very important for space transportation. The emphasis is required how we could use antimatter, because uh, huge amount of energy is required. But if we could do how one or three applications, where we can do initial pilots and try to apply them at different experiments, I think it's going to be great for antimatter propulsion in terms of antimatter. Or we could use this antimatter, to essentially to use it for orbital slingshots. Or if you wanted to use the thrusters at some point, and use antimatter, matter antimatter propulsion to take it to the next level, or to go to the final destination. I think it's going to be great. Coming talking about the whole space enabled technologies, how we could leverage the sustainable solutions on Earth. I think there's the important thing right now is a famine, drought, and also you could famine, drought is one thing. Like you could see in India, there are different parts, and during summer, a lot of people suffer from famine, drought, lack of water, and sometimes it gets too hot that people die because of the hotness of the weather conditions. I think it's important that the weather conditions and these things, some disasters, and something which can be preventable using can should be done. And it is important the space technologies and imaging and all this could be leveraged to protect people on Earth, for the welfare of the Earth. And yeah, so that is that. So other thing what I wanted to talk about is how are we going to see the next 10 to 50 years in terms of space transportation, with regards to how well we use the technologies for efficiently to manufacture these products, and to send it to do different kind of testing. Because right now, that Mars has very little amount of oxygen that requires you require some kind of a you require some kind of a some kind of a oxygen to live there. Or sending humans to Mars is going to be great. But it is important that we have taken all the precautions for humans to live in Mars. But the atmosphere doesn't support the existing climatic conditions that we have in Earth. So one way is the one idea, which is something you could make Mars habitable with creating an artificial atmosphere that supports life. For example, creating an artificial atmosphere which supports life, as in like oxygen, or creating the resources that is required to replicate it, and trying to create life there, or trying to make it habitable for life. For example, you need water, you need you need oxygen. So you need light, proper light. And the temperature in the nights and the morning, it goes extreme at Mars. And there is a total conditions which is required for humans to be habitable there. And it's going to be a great challenge for scientists to do it. But it is important that we understand this particular things that which are there for opportunities for us to progress, and try to use that opportunities, do experiments, and then make it work. Because the space industry at the whole, it's kind of a it's not that innovative compared to kind of innovative and inventive compared to the other fields. But we could do a lot more better than that. That's the whole point. And yes, space transportation and the modeling and everything, it's important. And one of the things, like how we can use these technologies, like from collision from asteroids, like how we could use this flying car, how we could use this satellites to detect any comets or meteors coming from hitting from Earth, or creating any disaster, or preventing earthquakes. It's all possible if we can create some kind of a central solution with has with ha- the idea is to have some kind of a flying cars which monitors every aspect of things which can be prevented at some point, the Earth, like disasters, or natural disasters, or some kind of things which can be preventable, like fires and everything. I think flying cars, if we could use flying cars for detecting these, for sustainable solutions, for be it from health as in, like, when I say health, finding the patterns, imaging, and using remote sensing, and using trying to detect early prediction of this tsunami alerts and everything, forecasting of hurricanes. It could be leveraged, and it could be used for more, potentially for better purposes, is the whole point. Yeah, so flying cars is going to be the next thing, and how we are going to use the flying car in better designs is something important, and regulations is going to be, it's going to be a huge role in this. Flying cars, when I say flying cars, it's not just for humans to transport, but it could be also be a central solution for flying at a lower head, like how we wanted to send our goods or get our goods, how we wanted to move place to place. And if that wanted to, if that might not be and essentially an AI could operate these things. Essentially, there need not be a specific central thing which controls these things. It could be democratized. The artificial intelligence, or the governments could work to prevent terrorism or anything, like you don't want to send a huge army to a specific place, and for a mission or an expedition. But if you have good technologies like as flying cars, you might be able to use it for better for eradicating global issues like terrorism, and natural disasters and everything. I think flying cars is going to be future. I think it can be also the future transportation, future space transportation, and also for intracity transportation within Earth, for helping mankind for better sustainable solutions. Thank you.